Chinedu stood at the edge of his village, staring at the rusted yellow bus parked by the roadside. Its engine coughed and groaned like an old man, but it was the only way out. The conductor shouted, calling for passengers heading to the city. Chinedu clutched his small bag tightly, his heart beating fast. Behind him, the village was quiet, zinc roofs gleaming under the morning sun, dry wind brushing through empty farmlands. His family had nothing left. The crops failed. Hunger knocked on every door. There was no more time to wait. With a deep breath, he climbed into the bus and sat by the window. The seat was torn. The air smelled of sweat and dust. As the engine rumbled to life, Chinedu looked back one last time. His home grew smaller and smaller until it vanished behind a curtain of red dust. The road stretched far ahead. Villages and trees passed by like ghosts. The bus bounced over potholes, its passengers silent, lost in their own thoughts. Chinedu stared outside, trying not to think about how scared he was. Would Emeka still be the same? Would the city help or hurt? His hands trembled slightly. He remembered his mother's voice, soft, and people whispered stories about the city, how it could make you rich or ruin you in one breath. Chinedu said nothing. He just held on, his hope and fear fighting quietly inside him. By the time the bus reached the edge of the city, the sky had already turned dark. Lights flashed everywhere, bright, fast, and cold. They stabbed at Chinedu's eyes. The city smelled strange, like burning wires, smoke, and something foul hiding deep below the ground. The noise hit him like a wall. Honks, shouts, screeches, all crashing together. People moved like waves, never stopping, never breathing, never looking up. Then he saw him, Emeka, leaning against a sleek, black luxury car, smiling like nothing had changed. His clothes were clean. His watch shined. He looked like he belonged in this place. Chinedu felt a knot twist in his belly. Emeka walked over, pulled him into a hug, and clapped him on the back like old times. "You made it," Emeka said with that same easy grin. Without a word, Emeka opened the car door and nodded for him to get in. Chinedu did, as the city swallowed them whole. Winding through glowing streets and towering shadows, something inside him shifted. The darkness here felt heavier, like it was breathing. Something was watching. Something was waiting. And as they disappeared into the heart of the city, Chinedu knew. It was already too late to turn back. Emeka's mansion stood tall on the edge of the city, shining under the night sky like a palace. The walls were bright and smooth, the floors made of glassy stone that clicked under Chinedu's bare feet. Expensive lights glowed in every room, and servants moved quietly through the halls. But even with all the beauty, something felt wrong. The air was cold, and a strange silence hung heavy like a wet cloth. Emeka walked through the house with quiet steps. His eyes didn't smile the way they used to. He seemed stronger now, different. Like he carried something inside him that didn't belong to this world. That night, he didn't talk much. Instead, he led Chinedu through a tall, hidden door behind a bookcase. Down they went, through long stairs that led deep under the mansion. Below the house was a secret room made of stone. The walls were covered in old, strange marks that glowed red like firelight. They looked like they came from a world long forgotten. In that dark place, Emeka told his truth. He spoke of the children of Ogbunabali, a secret cult that lived through many ages hidden from the world. They followed the spirit of death, Ogbunabali, feared by their ancestors. Emeka said the cult held dark power, a power to control life and death. That power came from sacrifice, from giving something sacred, blood. The cult had learned to live in the city's shadows, moving quietly while the world looked away. Chinedu listened, his body shaking with fear. This was not just a story. This was real. His old friend was part of something dangerous and deep. Something tied to death itself. Then Emeka told him what it meant to join. It was not just a word or a handshake. It was a step into darkness. The ritual was simple, but terrible. To belong, Chinedu must eat human flesh. That was the bond, the promise that could not be undone. It would bring him riches, power, and safety beyond dreams. But it would also take a part of him forever. His soul would be changed. His heart froze. The room around him felt smaller. Could he do it? Could he cross into a world where life meant nothing and blood was the price? The house above was full of light, but here, deep below, everything was dark. Chinedu was no longer a guest in Emeka's home. He was standing at the edge of something evil, and it was calling to him. Chinedu sat alone in the dark room after Emeka left. His mind was heavy, spinning with thoughts that would not stop. The words, "eat human flesh," felt like a sharp knife, cutting through his heart. How could he do that? How could he become part of something so dark? But the hunger in his belly was worse. His family was starving back home. The city was full of chances, but only if he could survive this. Power and wealth were promises made in whispers, but they sounded like lifelines thrown to him in the storm. He wanted to believe it was true. He wanted to believe he could make a better life. But fear settled deep in his bones, cold and heavy. Days passed, and the city around him never stopped moving. People rushed past, busy with their own lives, unaware of the darkness hiding in the shadows. Chinedu felt like he was caught between two worlds. The safe village that was dying behind him, and the unknown city that demanded a terrible price. At night, strange noises echoed outside Emeka's home. Sometimes he heard whispers, like voices calling from far away, calling him to join. He felt eyes watching him, waiting for his answer. The spirit of Ogbunabali was said to be everywhere. Silent, patient, hungry. Chinedu tried to run from the thought, but it followed him like a shadow he could not shake. One night, Chinedu walked the streets alone. The city looked different under the moonlight, quiet, empty, but full of secrets. He saw faces in the darkness, faces that disappeared when he looked closer. He heard a low chant in the distance, soft but fierce. The promise of power and protection was a chain tightening around his neck. He knew the cult was waiting, watching, ready to pull him in. Chinedu's heart beat fast. There was no easy choice, no way back. The promise of the flesh was not just a ritual, it was a trap. And soon, he would have to decide what he was willing to lose to survive. That night, Emeka returned with new eyes, cold, sharp, almost not human. He said nothing for a long time. Then he took Chinedu to his secret room. He brought out something in a wrapped bundle. He put it in a calabash and gave Chinedu to eat. The air changed. It felt thick, like the walls were closing in. Chinedu didn't ask what was inside. He already knew. His heart started to pound so loud, it was hard to think. Emeka stepped back and watched him, his face still like stone. The time had come. Chinedu stared at the bundle, frozen. This was the test, the first step into the children of Ogbunabali. If he opened it, if he ate what was inside, there was no going back. His breath became shallow. His hands shook. The world around him felt far away, like he was sinking into a nightmare he couldn't escape. But hunger whispered to him. Not just hunger for food, but for change, for power, for safety, for a future that didn't hurt. Chinedu remembered the dry fields in his village, his mother's empty eyes, his younger brother's thin arms. This was more than a choice. It was a battle. A fight between the man he wanted to be and the boy still afraid inside him. He picked up the bundle with trembling hands. His stomach turned. The smell was strange, metallic. He didn't want to look, but he had to. Slowly, he unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a piece of roasted flesh, dark, glistening, silent, a gift from the dead, waiting to bind him to something old and cruel. Chinedu closed his eyes. The room was spinning, his throat was dry. He told himself it was just meat, just survival, just a step. He brought it close, lips shaking, body frozen. He took one bite, just one. The taste hit him like fire, bitter, wrong, heavy. But it was done. Silence fell. Emeka nodded once, slowly, then turned and walked away. Chinedu dropped the cloth. His hands felt dirty. His soul felt hollow. But deep inside, something had changed. He had crossed the line. The spirit had seen him now, and it would never let him go. In the stillness of that night, Chinedu felt it breathing around him, watching, waiting for what came next. Chinedu didn't sleep that night. He lay in a room bigger than his entire house, back in the village, with soft beds and golden lamps, but it felt colder than any hut he'd ever known. His body was hot and cold at the same time. Sweat dripped down his back, and his chest rose and fell like drums in a storm. The shadows on the high walls moved, even when there was no wind. Every sound felt loud. The tick of a clock, the creak of the floor, the soft breath of the night. He sat at the edge of the soft bed, staring at his hands. They looked normal, but they didn't feel like his. Inside, something had changed. He could still taste the flesh in his mouth. It stuck to his tongue like a bitter ghost. His stomach twisted, but deeper than the sickness was something darker. Something that felt like hunger, and it was starting to grow. By morning, Emeka came back. He didn't say a word. He wore rich clothes and gold rings, but his eyes looked empty. He led Chinedu through the wide gates of the mansion and into a quiet car waiting outside. They drove through the city, passing busy roads and silent alleys, until they reached a place no one ever talked about. It was a broken house hidden behind tall walls covered in green vines. Inside, the air was cold and full of smoke. The floor was lined with red cloth, and strange smells filled the room. Burning herbs, hot oil, and something sharp like blood. Men stood in a circle, all wearing long black robes. Their faces were covered, but Chinedu could feel them watching him. One stepped forward, holding a silver bowl filled with thick, dark liquid. He dipped a finger into it and marked Chinedu's forehead with a strange symbol. It burned like fire. Chinedu didn't scream. He didn't even flinch. He just stood still, breathing hard as the pain sank deep into his skin. Then the chanting started. It was low at first, like a whisper under the ground. Then it grew louder, deeper, like thunder hiding behind a door. The men moved in slow circles around him. The smoke got thick. Chinedu tried to breathe, but it was like the air had turned to stone. His head felt light, like he was drifting far away. The room disappeared. The floor, the walls, everything was gone. In the dark, he saw images, faces screaming, blood falling, hands stretching out from nowhere. And then he saw it. A shadow, tall and thin, with glowing red eyes. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It just stared at him like it knew him, like it had always known him. The spirit of Ogbunabali. Chinedu felt his legs shake, but he didn't fall. He just stood there, caught in its gaze. And he knew he wasn't alone anymore. The mark was real, and the spirit had claimed him. From that moment, he didn't belong to the world above. He belonged to something older. Something that would never let him go. After the ritual, Chinedu walked through the wealthy streets near Emeka's mansion. But everything felt strange. The houses were tall and shiny, the cars polished like mirrors, but the world looked dim to him. The colors had lost their warmth. The sky above the gated estates looked darker than it should. Every sound, engines humming, music from the clubs, even laughter, felt too loud, too sharp. People passed by in designer clothes and fancy shoes, but none of them felt real. Whispers followed him, even in silence. When he turned around, the roads behind him were clear, but the feeling stayed. At night, he lay in a silk-covered bed in a gold-lit room, but sleep never came. The mark on his forehead still burned like fire under his skin. It had faded from sight, but not from his soul. Sometimes, in the shiny glass walls or marble floors, he saw his own reflection. And the eyes looking back didn't feel like his. They were cold. Too cold. He never left Emeka's side. Emeka, now always dressed in fine suits and surrounded by rare perfumes and silent guards, was not the same man. The laughter that once filled his mansion halls had vanished. He moved through his luxury like a ghost. He spoke only when needed, and when he did, his voice carried no joy. Chinedu followed him to secret meetings, held not in dark alleyways, but in private lounges, penthouse apartments, and quiet back rooms of expensive art galleries. Other members of the cult gathered in silence. No handshakes, no smiles, only chants whispered under breath in a language older than memory. The city no longer looked like a place of wealth to Chinedu. It was a maze of power and shadows. The cult was hidden everywhere, in high-end restaurants, in private banks, in mansions with gates as tall as trees. He was learning the secret paths, one step at a time. He belonged now to something ancient and dangerous. One night, As they left a private gathering in a luxury hotel, Chinedu saw a man standing across the bright street. The man didn't blink. He just stood there, still and sharp, eyes locked on Chinedu like daggers. Chinedu turned to speak to Emeka, but by the time he looked back, the man was gone. And it didn't stop. Every day a different face, sometimes in the garden, sometimes by the mansion gate, sometimes reflected in windows, always watching, always silent. Chinedu began to question what was real. Were they men? Were they even human? Or were they spirits? Messengers of Ogbunabali? Was he being tested? Or was he slowly losing his mind? The line between truth and curse was blurring fast. The deeper he went into this world of wealth and shadows, the harder it was to breathe. The eyes never left, not even in the glow of gold, not even in his dreams. Chinedu woke up to a strange sound, scratching, faint, but sharp, like fingernails scraping along polished wood. He sat up quickly in the massive four-poster bed, surrounded by velvet curtains and soft pillows. The chandelier above him swayed gently, but the lights were off. The room was too quiet. Emeka lay across the room on a silk-sheeted couch, turned away, breathing deeply. But the sound didn't stop. It moved beneath the marble floor. Slowly, from under the bed, toward the grand oak door, Chinedu's heartbeat quickened. He reached for the crystal lamp on the bedside table, but when he flicked it on, the bulb only flickered and went dead. Darkness swallowed the room. The scratching grew louder. He clenched the sheets. Maybe it was just the house settling, or a rodent. But then came the whisper, low, cracked, like the wind had learned to speak with a mouth that didn't belong to this world. It called his name, and it knew how to say it. The next morning, sunlight poured through the mansion's high windows. Chinedu tried to forget. He dressed in clean designer clothes, splashed his face with cold water from a gold-trimmed faucet, and stepped outside. The driveway sparkled with luxury cars. Gardeners moved quietly across the grounds. It all looked normal, but the sound from the night still echoed in his mind. As he walked past the black gate, he noticed a small child standing near the fountain. The boy stared at him without blinking. Then, with a quiet voice, he pointed at Chinedu's forehead. "You've been touched," the boy said. Then he turned and disappeared behind the trees. Chinedu froze. No one should be able to see the mark. It was hidden to the world, except to those who had the spirit's sight. The fear came rushing back. The whisper wasn't just under the floor. It had followed him. It had moved inside him. It was part of him now. That evening, Emeka took him to a private villa on the edge of town. One that looked empty, but was guarded by silence. Heavy black curtains blocked the windows, and the entrance smelled of wet earth and something darker. Inside, the cult members stood in a perfect circle on expensive Persian rugs. A small fire burned in a bronze bowl. One of the elders, dressed in deep red silk and gold chains, held a carved bone in his hand. Strange symbols were etched into it. He waved it slowly over the flame, then pointed at Chinedu without saying a word. The room went still. The elder spoke. The spirit had begun to speak to Chinedu. The whisper in the dark was a sign of favor, a sacred gift. But all gifts demanded obedience. Chinedu was no longer just a follower. He was a vessel. The others nodded in silent agreement. Chinedu stood frozen. The whisper was in his head now, louder, bolder, twisting through his thoughts. He wanted to scream, but he didn't. The spirit had already made a home in him, and it would not leave. The whisper didn't stop. Every night it returned, calling softly, scratching just beyond sight, breathing near Chinedu's ear. It no longer waited beneath the floor. Now it lived in the shadows of the chandelier, behind the gold-framed mirrors, in the silent corners of Emeka's mansion. Chinedu tried to block it out. He told himself he still had control, that he was still himself. But each night, the line between thought and command faded. Then, one evening, Emeka entered his lavish guest suite. He said nothing, only placed a black leather bag on the glass table and left. Inside, Chinedu found a mask, hand-carved from blackened wood, twisted into a face of agony. Beneath it lay a knife with a curved blade, old and stained. The room suddenly felt colder. The whisper surged in his mind. It wanted blood. The next day, Emeka drove them through the city, not in a rush, but in his sleek black Rolls-Royce. The tinted windows kept the world out. They passed glittering shops, tall banks, and marble hotels. But Emeka turned down a narrow, forgotten road that felt like a crack in the city's surface. They arrived at an old building behind a luxury meat shop, hidden by high walls and silence. Inside the back room, the air was damp and cold. A man sat tied to a chair, gagged, terrified, eyes wide with panic. Chinedu froze at the door. The marble floor beneath his shoes felt like ice. Emeka handed him the blade. Behind him, cult members in tailored black suits watched with blank faces. No words, no warmth, just judgment. Chinedu trembled. His lungs refused to breathe. But the whisper screamed louder, tearing through his thoughts. The spirit was starving. This was the offering. His first step into full darkness. If he failed, he would lose the mark, the protection, and his soul. He met the man's eyes, and his heart began to crack. His hand moved slowly. The blade shook, but the whisper drove him forward, louder than fear, heavier than mercy. One slice, that was all. The man's body slumped. Blood pooled on the gleaming white tiles. And in that moment, silence fell like a curtain. A heavy, perfect silence. The others began to chant in a language older than the city itself. The fire in the corner of the room flickered blue. Chinedu stood still, numb. The presence of the spirit wrapped around him thick and cold. It was pleased. Emeka approached quietly and slipped the mask over Chinedu's face. The cult members bowed their heads. Chinedu stood in the center. The mask, wet with tears inside, his hands painted with blood. He had passed the test, but something in him had died. The whisper was silent now, but it wasn't gone. It would return, louder, stronger, hungrier, and next time it wouldn't ask. Days passed, and Chinedu no longer felt like the same boy who once feared the shadows. The fear had faded. Now the darkness seemed to move with him like silk, wrapping around his steps. Even as he strolled through the grand hallways of Emeka's private high-rise, guards and staff moved aside without a word. They couldn't explain it, but they felt something cold in him, something older than fear. He no longer needed to pretend. His posture was straight, his gaze steady, his heart unnaturally calm. The whisper in his head had evolved. It no longer pleaded. It commanded. And when Chinedu obeyed, the rewards came swiftly. Bank alerts, private access, influence, power had a taste, rich and intoxicating. And now, he was starting to crave it. Emeka, ever composed in his tailored suits and gold wristwatches, handed Chinedu a sleek new iPhone, a luxury sports car key, and a penthouse suite of his own. It was unlike the modest guest room he had known before. This place sparkled with imported marble floors, chrome furniture, and soft glowing lights. Designer clothes hung in the wardrobe. The fridge was stocked with imported food and wine. A private elevator led to a rooftop pool. Chinedu sat back on the velvet couch and laughed softly, but the sound held no joy. He had it all now, everything he once dreamed of. Yet deep inside there was a hollow place the riches couldn't reach. The spirit had delivered its promise, but every gift cast a long shadow. And each night, the whisper returned. More, it said. Bring me more. Chinedu would stare out at the glowing skyline from his glass balcony, lights flickering like distant eyes. Even here, even now, he felt watched. The dreams became worse. Faces he had never seen, screaming, bleeding, homes he'd never entered, burning, shaking. He woke up drenched in sweat, the invisible mark on his forehead pulsing like fire. By day, he met with more of the cult's elite, men in Italian suits, women in diamond necklaces. They smiled warmly, but their eyes were cold and empty. They welcomed him with soft words that carried the weight of secrets. Chinedu belonged now, a chosen vessel, a servant of Agbunabali. There was no turning back. One evening, during a quiet gathering in Emeka's private lounge, an elder took Chinedu's hand and slid a ring onto his finger. A black stone set in a heavy silver band. Now the world will know who you are, the elder whispered. Chinedu nodded. He felt taller, stronger. But inside the strength, a voice still whispered, low, greedy, never satisfied. The hunger would only grow. Chinedu stood before the mirror, frozen. The man staring back wore his clothes, moved like him, but it wasn't him. The face was wrong. The skin was too smooth, too perfect. The smile curved upward, but the eyes were hollow. The reflection tilted its head before he did. Then it blinked, once, slowly, after he had already looked away. He stepped back, breathing hard. The mirror was quiet, still, but he could feel it watching. Something had taken his place, waiting for a moment of weakness to step through. He turned away, but the cold inside his chest clung to him. The whisper was silent now, completely gone, but that quiet was worse than the noise. It felt like something holding its breath, something buried, watching from deep beneath his skin. When he walked through the hallways of Emeka's penthouse, the lights flickered. When he passed windows, he avoided his reflection, but the feeling stayed, the wrongness, as if someone or something had entered his body and rearranged the pieces. That night the dream came again, but this time it felt like a memory. He saw his village, the dusty road, the scent of firewood in the air. His mother was there, stirring a pot. His sister laughed and chased a chicken across the yard, but everything was bathed in a red mist. Blood flowed like water beneath their feet. They called his name. He ran to them, but his mouth wouldn't open. He had no lips, no voice, just hollow breath. And behind them in the mist, the man from the mirror stood, wearing his clothes, smiling with a face that wasn't his. Chinedu woke up gasping. The sheets were soaked. The mark on his forehead burned like fire. He felt something wet on his cheek and reached up, tears, the first in months. By midday a message arrived. He was summoned. The car took him to a house with no sign, hidden between the city's old walls. Inside, the air was thick with smoke. Strange markings were painted on every surface. A drum thumped slowly in the corner, beating on its own. No hands touched it. The next day, one of the elders called him to a house with no name. Inside, the walls were covered in strange marks. A small drum played by itself in the corner. The elder handed him a piece of paper with a name on it. "The spirit wants this offering next," he said. Chinedu looked at the name, and his chest tightened. It was someone he knew, someone from the village. A man who has been helping his family in his village. A kind man. His uncle. "The spirit doesn't forget," the elder said. Chinedu tried to speak, but his voice was gone. He walked out of the house, the paper clenched in his fist. That night, he cried for the first time since joining the cult. But the tears didn't help. The spirit was inside him now, and the price had to be paid. One soul at a time. Chinedu stood outside the old apartment block, heart beating like a drum. The name on the paper still burned in his pocket. His hand shook as he knocked on the wooden door. It opened, and there stood the man from the village, Nana. His face lit up with joy. "Chinedu," he said, arms open, smiling wide. But Chinedu couldn't smile. He stepped inside without speaking. The room was small but warm. There was food on the stove, a photo of Nana's mother on the wall, and a calm that felt far from the madness outside. "What brings you here, my son?" Nana asked. Chinedu sat down, head low. The whisper in his head began again, slow and cruel. "Do it," it hissed. "Now." Nana poured him water, sat beside him and spoke of old times, of home, of the mango tree where they used to play. His voice was full of light, but Chinedu's chest felt like stone. The knife was tucked inside his shirt. Every second felt heavier than the last. He looked at Nana, who trusted him completely, and something inside him cracked. "You've changed," Nana said softly, looking at his eyes. "Something has followed you here." Chinedu looked away, but he couldn't hide the mark. Nana saw it, and grew quiet. He nodded slowly, then whispered, "You don't have to do this." But the spirit screamed now, louder than ever. The room grew cold. Shadows moved on the walls. The lights flickered. "Do it," the voice demanded. Tears fell from Chinedu's eyes as he pulled the knife. Nana didn't move. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer. Chinedu's hand trembled. The knife hung in the air. Then, something strange happened. The mark on his head burned like fire, and for the first time, he fought back. He dropped the knife and fell to the ground, screaming. The spirit roared in his head, angry, wild. Blood poured from his nose. The room spun. Nana rushed to him, held him, prayed over him. Even as shadows danced around them, The spirit screamed one last time, then vanished into silence. Chinedu passed out in Nana's arms, the knife forgotten on the floor. That night, he didn't dream. But something had changed, and the spirit would not forget this betrayal. When Chinedu woke up, the room was quiet. The sun peeked through the window. Nana was sitting beside him, watching, worried. Chinedu felt weak. His head throbbed. His body ached. But most of all, he felt fear. Deep, crawling fear. The kind that lives in your bones. He remembered everything. The knife, the whisper, the fire on his forehead. He had disobeyed the spirit. He had broken the promise. And now, he was no longer safe. Nana handed him water. His hands shook as he drank. "You've done something brave," Nana said. "But the price will be heavy." Chinedu knew he was right. He could feel it already. The air felt heavier. The shadows darker. Something was coming. That night, Chinedu didn't sleep. He stayed near the window, watching, listening. At exactly midnight, the lights flickered. The temperature dropped. And then, he saw them, figures in black, standing across the street. Masks over their faces, motionless, silent. The children of Obunabali had come, not to warn, but to take. Chinedu's chest tightened. He had been marked for death. Not by man, but by the spirit itself. He ran to Nana. "They're here," he said. Nana nodded. "I know." They packed quickly. No time to think, only to run. But even as they escaped through the back, Chinedu felt eyes on his skin. Watching, judging, waiting for the right time to strike. They reached a small church on the edge of the city. Nana said the place was old. Protected by prayers and forgotten saints. Chinedu sat in the corner, shaking. He looked at his hands. His skin was changing. Dark veins. The mark on his forehead had spread, crawling down his face like firewood cracks. He touched it. It burned. Nana knelt beside him and began to pray. Loud. Fierce. The walls trembled, the candles flickered. The mark pulsed. Chinedu screamed. The spirit inside him was fighting back, clawing for control. But he held on, with every word from Nana. Something inside him loosened. Not gone, but weaker. "We can fight this," Nana said, "but not with knives, with prayers." Chinedu nodded, tears in his eyes. He had made a choice, and now he would face the storm. The church was quiet, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like something dark was holding its breath. Chinedu sat by the altar, shaking. He had not eaten. He had not slept. The mark on his skin had grown deeper. Black lines spread from his forehead to his neck, like roots under the skin. His eyes had changed too, now darker, colder. He felt the spirit inside him, scratching, biting, furious. Every moment it grew hungrier. Every second it begged for blood. "Give me what is mine," it whispered, "or I will take all." Nana stayed close, reading from an old Bible. He poured oil on Chinedu's head, but the spirit laughed. "Oil cannot save him," it said. "He belongs to me now." Suddenly, the church doors flew open. The masked ones had found them. 6 figures stepped inside, silent, slow. Their eyes glowed faint red behind the masks. One of them raised a hand. Chinedu screamed. His body rose off the ground, thrown like a doll. He hit the wall hard, bones cracking. Nana shouted prayers, louder and louder. The cult members didn't flinch. They moved closer. One of them took off his mask. It was Emeka. His face was hard now, cold. "You were chosen," Emeka said, voice like a hiss. "You broke the bond. Now you must feed the spirit." Chinedu tried to crawl, but pain shot through his chest. The spirit inside him laughed. "This is what betrayal feels like," it said. But just then, a strange light burst from the altar, bright, blinding. One of the cult members screamed and fell to the floor. Nana's voice rose like thunder. "You have no place here!" The spirit inside Chinedu screamed back, raw, angry, wild. But it was losing strength. For the first time, Chinedu felt it slipping. Emeka backed away, face twisted in fear. The light grew brighter, burning through the masks, burning through the lies. One by one, the masked men fled, vanishing into smoke. Chinedu fell to the ground gasping, the mark on his skin glowing like fire. He was still alive. But the spirit was not gone. Just weaker. Still hungry. Still waiting. And now it knew he would not serve it again without a fight. Chinedu sat alone in the church. The morning sun cutting through the dusty windows. His body ached. His spirit felt broken, but alive. The mark on his skin was still there, faint now, but pulsing with a slow, steady beat. Nana sat beside him, quiet, but watchful. "You have angered the spirit," he said softly, "and it will not forget." Chinedu nodded. The weight of those words pressed down on him like a heavy stone. He wanted to run far away, but there was nowhere to go. The city was full of eyes. The cult had spies everywhere. Even friends might be enemies. The promise had tied him to something bigger than himself. Something old. Something that could not be escaped. That night, the wind howled outside the church walls. Chinedu's mind raced with fear and regret. The spirit whispered again, soft but cold. "You think you can fight me?" it asked. "You belong to me." Chinedu shivered. He knew the truth. The power the spirit gave was a chain, not a gift. He remembered the faces, those who had disappeared, those he had betrayed, the blood that stained his hands. He clenched his fists, tears falling. He did not want to be a monster, but he also knew that the cult would never let him go. The children of Ogunabali were patient. They waited for those who strayed, for those who thought they could escape. Suddenly, the church doors creaked open. A shadow stepped inside. It was a woman, cloaked in black, her face hidden. She moved with a calm that chilled Chinedu to his bones. She placed a small box on the altar and spoke without words. Nana understood. "A warning," he whispered. The box was heavy, made of dark wood. Inside lay a small bone carved with ancient symbols. It was a sign, a message, the spirit's last warning. "Return," the woman said, voice like the wind, "or be claimed." Chinedu stared at the box, heart pounding. He was caught between two worlds, the living and the cursed, and he didn't know which side would win. Chinedu stood at the edge of the city, the dark forest behind him whispering secrets in the wind. The box from the church felt heavy in his hands, like it carried the weight of his soul. The spirit inside him stirred, restless and hungry. He knew what the cult wanted, for him to return, to give in, to take the final step and become one with the children of Ogunabali forever. But Chinedu also knew he could not. He looked at the city lights twinkling like stars, then at the darkness beyond. One path meant losing everything, his family, his heart, his freedom. The other meant facing the unknown, alone, without power or protection. Memories flooded him. His mother's warm smile, his sister's laughter, the smell of the earth after rain. He remembered the man who had saved him, Nana, and the night in the church when the light pushed back the darkness. The spirit's voice hissed in his head, promising power, wealth, and safety if he obeyed. But it also promised pain, blood, and death. Chinedu closed his eyes, tears falling quietly. The choice was clear. He would not let the cult's darkness win. He would face whatever came without fear. He threw the box into the fire nearby. Flames swallowed it quickly, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The mark on his skin faded like smoke. The spirit inside him screamed. But this time, Chinedu was stronger. He stepped forward into the night, free, not of the past, but of the promise. The city was silent. The cult was watching. But Chinedu was ready. He had lost much, but he had kept his soul. And sometimes, that was enough.